Hello and welcome everybody. We're extremely excited for you to be joining us, not only at this webinar, but at the hackathon that's going to be occurring here starting on Monday. NetApp has a huge presence at this event. We're huge supporters of developer and developer hackathon events. So this webinar that we're going to go through is around using the ONTAP cloud environment at the hackathon. My name is Michael Elliott. I'm Cloud Strategist for NetApp, and joining me today is Salim Mohammed, who is the Senior Cloud Evangelist for NetApp. Say hello for us, Salim.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session.
Thank you, Salim. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. There is the opportunity for ask questions in the chat window. Mimi is going to be monitoring that for us and giving us any questions. Feel free to ask. We will either jump in during the session or we'll address them at the end based on just where they're appropriate. So with that, a little bit about NetApp. Obviously, many people know who NetApp is, but for those of you that don't, we are one of the largest storage manufacturers in the world. Along with that, though, is the software that runs our storage devices called ONTAP. We're the #1 storage and device management software in the world, and ONTAP is the world's leading brand in storage operating system. Now, with ONTAP, we have taken that software and ported that into AWS as well as Azure and IBM SoftLayer. But for this event, it's really focused on the AWS environment that gives you capabilities and advantages, things like data management, data control, beyond what you're going to normally get with just an S3 environment or even with AWS EBS environment. That's really what we want to see you test out. So as you develop in this environment for the hackathon, we want you to use our storage management software to store your database and to store your files. So the hackathon is really about choosing whatever you want to build. Accepting our challenge, yes. You can accept other people's challenges. So for example, one may be around building an innovative IoT or mobile or enterprise app. And there are within the hackathon, other challenges that you can also take on as well using potentially their APIs and their code sets, but use our storage environment to place your database, to place your data sets. Now there's the second example as well. For those that are not as inclined towards the developer side, but more the DevOps, looking to take advantage of some of the opportunities of running a development environment for developers, we've done full integration of our APIs, and I'll talk about that next. But within this, you can either create your own database. If you're just using files, that's great. Create your own database within our environment. We've also pre-configured the environment with MySQL database. Now, like I mentioned, the environment can be used for any application, but for those of you looking at the DevOps environment, you can use any tool, any platform, any IDEs such as Jenkins and Docker and Swarm and Kubernetes and Eclipse and so on, provided that you do this in our environment. Now, a pure enterprise environment is really a hybrid cloud environment where you have your data center that is running a ONTAP instance mirroring over into the Amazon AWS environment, of which ONTAP also runs. Now, for this hackathon environment, we're only going to be focused in AWS. So I'm going to provide for you an EC2 instance, multiple EC2 instances if you want, completely for free, that is attached to the ONTAP storage system, ONTAP Cloud, to provide the entire environment you need, free of charge, no charge around that, for you to just do what you want to build, the DevOps environments, the developer environments, the application that you want to pursue. I'll provide the entire environment pre-configured for you to just start up and run with that. Now, the features that we'd like to see you integrating into that are features like cloning and backup and snapshots and deduplication and encryption. And I'll have a document day of the event that kind of talks about what these features look like, how you use them, the links to more information, more detailed information around that, as well as this PowerPoint will be made available for you. And when you sign up for our challenge, I'll give you all the credentials you need, all the IP addresses you need to get you up and running, and then I'm going to have a team of engineers there ready and willing to answer your questions to help you be successful. Now, some of the additional features within this, although, is we have full API integration, and for us it's called Storage Level Manager. We have pure, total Docker volume plugins. So if you're running containerized environment, we have the Docker volume plugins for your storage already pre-configured in this. We also have Jenkins integration. If you want to deploy a Mongo database, we have all that pre-configured to enable you to be able to do that. Anything else that we want to add within that, Salim?
I think you're covered in, Michael.
All right, brilliant. So with that, I want you to kind of understand and see before you walk in what the ONTAP cloud environment looks like. So as you walk in, you're going to have the physical disk, the aggregates. You're going to carve out volumes. Those are already going to be done for you. You have logical, the LUNs, already the numbers, the IP addresses, everything you need is already going to be pre-configured, but we want to see you create more around that. So to kind of just show you what the environment looks like. Now, hopefully you're going to use API integration and you're not really going to need to go into here because APIs are sexier than just command line interface. But this is going to give you a flavor, and I'll give you access to this just so you can see if you want to just use the command line interface to play around with it, I'll give you that. So you're going to get a tenant, and everybody who signs up will get a tenant. It's your free space that only you'll have access to. In this case, the tenant you have is called ONTAP ABBA. Now, one thing, when you go in, it's going to ask you, do you want to do a cloud sync to an S3 bucket? For right now, don't choose that. You can choose that later on into the environment, but don't begin that process now. And I'll explain during the event kind of the rationale for that. As you create volume, and like I said, I've already created a volume in there for you to start playing with, but if you want to create additional volumes for various reasons, all valid, what you're going to do is where it says test volume, that's where you're going to put your name in. Keep it as NFS. Put a size of 1 gigabyte. If there's a reason you need a larger space, that's fine, but keep it at 1. The important thing is keep the custom export policy as you see. Just keep it general purpose. None of this needs is a change. We want you to be fast and efficient as you spin this up. And then you'll just hit create and away you go. Now once you do that, it is going to provide for you a test volume. Or a volume. So whatever you name that volume, it'll provide that for you. There's some advanced features around that that you can go explore. The important thing is, as you have your EC2 instance, you need to know how to mount that volume to your EC2. So what you do is you'll just click on Team Cherry, go down into Mount Command, and Team Cherry could be Team ABBA, and the team names are either going to be around musical groups or musical artists, or around automotive like Dodge or Ford or Chevy. I have a whole list of these and you'll have that. That mount command will then pop up. This is the mount command that you're going to need then to connect your EC2 instance to your volume. Once you go into that EC2 instance, here are the commands that you'll need to just enter into to be able to mount that volume. Salim, anything else you want to add into this?
Yes, Michael. So if you look at the if you look at the top window, it says 10.10.11.58. So that is your EC2 instance. You go into your EC2 instance and then you can mount your volume, which we saw from the last screen. It is 10.10.11.118. So mount that volume onto the EC2 instance, and then you'll be able to use that volume from your application that is going to be deployed on the EC2 instance. Back to you, Michael.
All right, brilliant. And everybody's going to have a different root IP address based on the EC2 instance I gave you. So if you were team NXS, you would have an EC2 instance that was NXS. You would be going into there. It would have a unique IP address for that. Going on, just mounting NFS Share going on. Anything you want to add in on this slide, Salim?
This is an example, again, for a different EC2 instance. And the volume that is being mounted here is seen on the right hand side, 10.10.11.163. That is the mount IP. One thing you have to note here is that all the EC2 instance should have the NFS utils installed. As Michael mentioned, we will do the installation on the EC2 instance that we give you, so you don't need to do that. But this is for information only. In case if there's no NFS util installed, then you need to install it. And this is the instruction for installing the NFS util and also mounting the volume. So the way it is going to be set up is that you will have an EC2 instance for your application. So that's where you're going to run your application. And then as Michael mentioned, you'll have ONTAP Cloud. That is the NetApp data operating system that will encapsulate the EBS data store. And you will have to mount the volume that is managed by ONTAP Cloud onto your application EC2 instance.
Brilliant. And like I mentioned, we're going to have a team of engineers on hand. We have a couple webinar sessions or a couple live sessions during the event. So as you have questions, we'll be going through this and we can address them. We have a host of engineers that are ready to come to your table wherever you are to help you. And it's not as difficult as I'm probably making it sound right now. It's pretty straightforward for most developers and most DevOps folks. But I did want to kind of just walk through and just highlight some of the things that could reach out. Now, oh, I got to erase that. My apology. That stays. So around cluster management, there is advanced features and capabilities that you can look at. There we go. So with that, just around that. Now, that was the command line interface. Now we're going to get into what are the things that we want to see you playing around with. First of all, API integration. And this really goes to how are we going to judge those activities during the judging contest? What's going to appeal to us? First of all, API integration is extremely important. How do you use the APIs? Are you combining things? Are you building within your development some cool things around API integration? Are you using containers? That's really exciting for us. Database management, there is some database. There's a tool that we have called Snap Center. I wasn't able to get it properly configured for the hackathon environment, and that just allows you to do cloning of just the database. So instead of cloning the entire volume, you can just do database cloning. Unfortunately, that won't be available for the environment, so you won't be able to do that. But full CI/CD integration, this is some of the things that are really exciting for us. Those people that are building CI/CD integration, as well as deploying Mongo database. And Salim, what else would you like to add around continuous CI/CD? What would you like to add around that really appeals to us as we judge?
Right. So Michael, one thing is that, as Michael mentioned, the Jenkins is fully integrated with ONTAP Cloud. So you can actually go to the Jenkins screen and you can do your build process. But underneath the covers, using the SLM API, Jenkins has been pre-integrated with ONTAP Cloud and the data volume. So when you build your application package, you will be able to clone it as part of your workflow process. So what cloning does is that it makes a point-in-time copy. Think of it, let's say you're creating an application package and you want to share it with 100 developers, with 1,000 developers across a different environment. What you have to do is that you have to create a copy for each one, you have to push the copy, it takes time. Instead, with this integration, you can just clone it, which means everybody will get instantaneously access to your application package or the latest build. And then they can access it without consuming storage, without consuming cost, without consuming time. Because think of cloning as a pointer-based operation. Everybody will get a pointer to the base source package and they can use it. And whenever they make any change in their own branch, only the change is stored for that particular user. So that way we will optimize cost, create storage efficiency, and optimize time to do the application development process. So that's on the CI part. And the CD part is that when you're testing it on a database, and if multiple people want to test on the same database, you can give them copies of the database for them to do the testing. Instead, if you clone it, then if it's a 1 terabyte database or a 10 terabyte database, If you clone it 6 times for different set of people for doing testing, for different QA testing or FIT or SIT testing, then you're only taking 10 terabyte and you're giving that 10 terabyte for 6 or 7 different groups doing different testing. So again, you're optimizing space, you're optimizing time, and you're actually expediting the process of continuous integration and continuous delivery. So the first part in the build, we have already pre-integrated with Jenkins. The second part, when you clone the database, we left it for the development teams to come up with innovative ways to incorporate that in their workflow process.
No, brilliant. And we're going to have some examples, just kind of highlighting what you're talking about. I also probably, past winners of hackathons that we have sponsored have included some, watering systems and water monitoring station that utilize across different farms and different systems to monitor how much water is going in. Another one was around plant recognition and understanding, and it was really starting to get into AI and machine learning around how much water this type of plant needs based on sensors, and it actually integrated some sensors in that. Another application, I think that was a Jenkins integration, was around an entire real estate forms and document monitoring and management system, and being able to do some cloning around that. So we've had some really interesting, really cool applications built in the past. So we're really excited to see what the New York audience, the New York hackers, are going to come up with, and how they integrate and how they utilize NetApp ONTAP Cloud.
So Michael, I also want to add a couple of points. You made a very interesting observation, Michael, with respect to CI/CD integration. Just to follow along the same thought process. So we have the API services, and as Michael mentioned, it's RESTful APIs. You can also use those APIs and create your own workflow and do your own integration. So you have an option of trying to create your own integrations, or you can use the Jenkins integration that is provided. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is that when Michael mentioned about database management, Snap Center not being available for the hackathon environment, but what Snap Center does is that it allows you to look at your database as a complete entity. So you can clone the database in its entirety. Whereas if you use the APIs, you have more granular access to your data. You can take a volume, you can clone the volume. That gives you granular access. So you have both options. Now, since Snap Center is not available, we will still provide you with the scripts for you to query the database and then take a clone of all the volumes and then unquery the database and then mount the database. We'll provide you with that script so that you will actually be able to simulate the functions from Snap Center. That's another point. And the third point is that if you're developing an application in containers, so all the EC2 instances wherein you're going to load your applications, all of them have got a Docker volume plugin. It is NetApp's plugin for integration to persistent volumes. So your application will have integration in a Docker container, will have integration to the volumes. So the volumes will be persistent, and you can do all kinds of operations for either stateless transactions or stateful transactions. So that's another feature that is being provided. But all of them use inherently the NetApp SLM APIs, and those APIs are available for you also for you to use it and automate your entire application and also your development environment. Back to you, Michael.
No, brilliant. Thank you for adding that. And what we've seen in the past is typically anywhere from a low of 16 or 17 teams up to as many as 30 teams have taken on the NetApp challenge as a part of a bigger development process. And we've seen teams from anywhere from 2 people up to 5 or 6 people, and have really just been blown away with what hackers are able to come up with. So kind of recapping a little bit of, yes, you're going to get volume, but we want to see you utilizing snapshots and flex cones and all the different functionalities. Now, aggregates, there's no APIs for aggregates at this time, so don't worry about that. The SLM, RESTful APIs, we've already kind of covered that. One thing I do want to make sure is when you go into the command line for ONTAP Cloud, it'll ask you if you want to upgrade. And like any enterprise, there's always upgrades. You want to do upgrades in its entirety, so please do not hit, yes, I want to upgrade. I've got the environment extremely stable the way it is. Probably wouldn't have an issue if you upgrade, but it may change some things that we're not ready to go in and diagnose if there's an issue. So don't upgrade. That's my only request for you. Anything else you want to add there, Salim?
No, that's a good point, Michael. As Michael mentioned, the environment has been set up for use at the hackathon, so please do not upgrade the ONTAP cloud instance. That's one thing. The second thing is that the APIs are available for you. What Michael showed you from the graphical user interface, wherein you can see your volume, you can see your ONTAP cloud instance. So that is a graphical interface to it. But in your application, from automation point of view, if you want to create volume, if you want to clone the volume, if you want to delete the volume, etc., the full function APIs are available. And in fact, we have simulators for the API, so you can even try it before you use it. So that would be an optimal way to start using the API so that you can enable automation in your applications. Back to you, Michael.
Nope, absolutely. And typically what we've seen is, from a team perspective, there's always one person on the team that's really focused on all these integrations, while other members of the team are building their own web interface and building the actual applications and working through that. So just what we've seen from winning teams in the past. Now we're going to get into API environment. I'm going to turn it over to Salim to kind of lead this quickly through the API, the integration, how that kind of works. And like I mentioned, we are going to go through this during day of session. I'll have engineers, so we wanted to give you a high-level kind of view of this. So take it away, Salim.
Thank you, Michael. So we talked about the APIs. Now we want to go through some of the examples of using the API. So one thing to remember in the API is that there are different set of keys, and you need the keys to do API functions. So the first key we're going to talk about is storage service level key, which is a fixed key, and that's a key value, and this is true for everybody. Every team, as Michael mentioned, whether your team ABBA, whether your team Beatles, whether your team Ford or Chevy or whatever it is, this key is fixed for everybody, and you will use this key. Now there's another key called storage VM key. That is the key for the vServer. And this is unique to every ONTAP cloud version. So remember, ONTAP cloud encapsulates your EBS volume on AWS. So you'll have your own specific storage VM key based on your team name. It will be specific for ABBA, specific for Beatles. So that is the storage VM key. Then using these two keys, you can get the file share key. And the file share key will also be unique to every team. So can we go to the next slide, Michael?
Absolutely. Sorry, it seems like, there we go. There we go. Sorry about that.
So as we talked about, right, so there are APIs that are installed, and these APIs are called NSLM, NetApp Service Level Manager. The reason why the APIs are called SLM is that they also provide service level capabilities, right? Whether you want to have performance as your service, whether you want to have value-based service, depending on the type of workload you're putting into it. But for the sake of the hackathon, we have pre-created it with a specific service level. So you don't have to change the service level for this hackathon. What you see on the top, so I said there are going to be, the APIs are going to run in two servers. The reason we have got two API servers is that we have taken half the team and we have made them use one API server. The other half of the team is using the other API server. So the API server will be connected to your ONTAP cloud instance. So for example, if your team ABBA or Beatles or Ford or Chevy, so the API server, we will give you an IP address for the API server. We will give you the port number, and you can access the API server, and from there you can go directly access your ONTAP cloud instance based on your name. Your instance will also be called as ABBA, Beatles or Ford, and once you access your ONTAP cloud instance, then you can look at your volume and you can do anything there. You can create files, you can create databases, you can do whatever you want to do for your application. So this is an example of, and all the APIs are being exposed by our Swagger. So you can simulate your APIs, you can try and you can use it. So this gives you a graphical view of the APIs if you want to try it out. So in this case, we want to try it out to get a storage VM key. So the IP address at the top and the port number takes you to that API server. And then once you give, if you go down to the left side where it says name and it says SVM ONTAP ABA, so that is where you can give the name of your ONTAP cloud instance. So once you do that, then if you look at the response body, you will see the key. That is the storage VM key. So that is how you get the storage VM key. If you want to do it through Swagger, you can test it out. And then once you start writing your application for automation, you can embed this API within your application program or within your script or within whatever configuration file that you want to handle to do automation process. So that is the storage level key. Good, Michael.
You just take the response body, right, and just cut and paste it right in from Swagger, and away you go. It's that straightforward. Is that correct?
Simple, yeah.
Yeah.
That is correct, Michael. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So then we are talking about, so once you have the storage VM key, you can see all the file shares that are attached to the storage VM key. If you look at the same Swagger interface on the left side, we have entered the storage VM key. And on the right side, you can see the response. It shows there are 5 records. So that means there are 5 file shares in the storage VM key and gives you the information. So this is just to see how many, after you create a file share, to see how many file shares are there, what are the keys for the file share, etc. Let's go to the next slide. All right. Now, if you were to create a file share in a storage VM, so when you say storage VM, it's on your ONTAP cloud. You want to create a file share. So if you look at it, this is the API for doing that, creating the file share. On the left-hand side, if you look at the body of the API, we have the storage service level key, which is the common key for everybody. We'll give you that key. That is your key. And then based on the key, you can get the storage VM key, which gives you the storage VM key for your ONTAP cloud instance, ABA, Beatles, or whatever it is. And then you can create a file share by whatever name you want to create. In this case, we are creating a file share by the name Hackathon file share, and we are allocating a size. Whatever GB of size you want to allocate, you can put that down. So this is, remember Michael showed you the graphical user interface, wherein you can also create volumes and create file share. And this is the API way of doing it. So if you do the size, and then if you look at the response body, you get a key. This is the key for the job that is being created, and you can see the status of the job that says started. And now if you come down to the response headers, there is an element called location, and the location also gives you the URI for the job. You can actually take that URI, post it, and you can see what is the status of the job if you want to check it out that way also. Next slide, please. Right. So once the file share is created, now you want to get the key for the file share. Ultimately, the reason for doing that is to creating a file share and then getting a mount point of the file share. So once you get the resource key of the job, and then you can go and then you can run this API, which gives all the attributes of the specified job. And remember, that job is the one to create the file share, which we call the Hackathon file share. Now, if you look at it, it gives you the key of the created file share, and it says the job is completed. So use the job key and then use this API, and then it will give you the resource key of the file share that has been created by the job. Next slide, please. So now you've got the file share key. Remember, we started off with the storage service level key, and we got the storage VM key that is unique for every team, and we created a file share, and we got the file share key. And this file share is in your own volume, is in your own instance of data operating system, which is the ONTAP cloud. Now you got the file share key. Now you should also get the export policy key for your ONTAP instance. So it will be ONTAP. If you look at the right hand side, export SVM ONTAP, team name will be ABA or Ford or whatever it is. Using that, you will get the NFS share key. And with the NFS share, you can get the IP access point. Next slide, please. So here you are trying to get the export policy key. All you have to do is that if you want to use Swagger, you can try it out. You can get the export SVM, ONTAP, ABA, or Beatles, or Ford. And then if you look at the response section, you will get the export policy key. And as Michael said, you can just cut and paste the key. Or if you are using it in your program, you can invoke the API. You can pass the response body, and then you can take it and put it into your code. Next slide, please. So now you've got the file share key, you've got the export policy key. So this API creates an NFS share, right? So you have the body is file share key and export policy key. And if you look at the right, so whenever you're creating anything, you will get a job key for tracking. So that's what on the right hand side. Or you can also use the job key for tracking, or you can also use the if you're using API, use the job key for tracking. If you're using Swagger, then you can also use the job key for tracking. Or if you're using within your application or on the CLI or whatever it is, or the web browser, you can use the job URI for tracking. So this is just gives the information for tracking what happened to the job that is initiated for creating the NFS share. Next slide, please. So now you're trying to get the NFS share key that has been created, because you want to ultimately end up getting the IP address for the mount point. So you got the export policy key, you got the file share key. If you look at the left of the screen, and both are in the parameters, and then you click on the try it out button at the bottom left, and then this creates this URL, which is for the API service. And then if you look at the response, you will get the NFS share key. Next slide, please. So once you've got the NFS share key, you want to get the IP address, the access point for the NFS share. So if it's in Swagger, just put the NFS share key here for this API. So the API is called IP access point. If you can see below the response class on the left-hand side, it says IP access point. NFS share key is there. Put the NFS share key, try it out, and then you will get the total number of records. It says there are 3 records, so that means there are 3 elements. And the 2 things to note here is that the first thing that says is data access protocol. It says NFS. It supports NFS. It supports SIFS. It supports those protocols. So that is a key thing. You have to get the access point which has got NFS protocol enabled, and then it gives you the IP address 10.10.11.222. And if you recollect at the beginning of the slide, Michael showed you a graphical user interface, and he showed you a mount command in the graphical user interface, and he clicked on the mount command. It showed you the IP address for mount. That is through graphical user interface, and this is through API services. You can use it from an API also. And this is the IP address for mounting the file share. Next slide, please. Right. Now you've got the IP address for mounting. You can go to CLI and you can mount it, or you can embed it within your script. So you see the mount point is 10.10.11.222, and then the EC2 that they're mounting on is 10.10.11.187. It's on the left-hand side. So one thing I want to also mention is that for you to SSH into the EC2 instance, for you to run these commands, Michael will give you a PEM file, and you can use that PEM file to go to this EC2 instance and then mount it.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, when I give out your environment credentials, I'll give you the PEM file, I'll give you a copy of the PowerPoint, I'll give you a copy of another document that just kind of explains all the different things. I'm going to try to make it as simple and straightforward as possible, but thank you for mentioning that, Salim.
So next slide, please.
So yeah, and this is where we're getting into the cool features of the environment.
So this is cloning. So think of it, right? So you want to create a dev environment, test environment, or you want to create an application which has got a large database, and then you want to do parallel processing on your application. So the best thing for you to do is that take a copy of the database and then give it for dev, test, and other environments. That's one way of doing it. if you want to replicate it for dev test. The other way of doing it is when you want to do parallel transaction processing on different segments of the data rather than doing sharding and other kind of complicated process which you have to manage. You can take a database and you can take copies of the database and run the applications with scale mode across these different data sets, and then you can actually reduce the total time to process the entire data set, right? For parallel processing, you can do all those things. Now, but copying takes a lot of time. First, it takes time. Second one is that based on the volume, it's going to take storage, it's going to be cost you. Now, how do we do it in a very optimized manner? That's why the cloning function comes into play. So when you clone a database, you are not taking a physical copy of the database. The clone will just be a pointer to your current database or your file. Now, if you have two jobs running, one job running on the clone, and it makes changes to the clone, remember the clone is a pointer pointing to the original data set. If you're making changes, if a developer A makes any changes to the database, so only the change information is tied along with that developer, along with that clone. The rest of the data is pointing to the original data set. Suppose we clone another version of that and give it to another developer, and if he makes changes, only that change is pointing to that developer. Only that change is visible to the developer and pointing to the developer. The original data set is always pointing to the is a clone. So imagine that, right? So you can take multiple clones of your data set. You can do it cross region, you can do it across different geographies, you can do it across different user testing environments, you can do it across different test beds. I mean, it gives you a world of possibilities. And I just want to, Michael did mention about applications that have been created, innovative IoT applications that have been created, green energy applications have been created, business applications have been created, and all of them make use of the cloning capability, either to optimize storage, improve performance, increase performance, or to create parallel transaction processing. So there is the world of possibilities that open up when you start using this capability. Now, this API gives you the ability to clone a file share. So here you are cloning it. The name of the file share, you're calling it Hackathon File Share Clone, and this is the API you're going to use for it to clone it, and that's the only parameter on the left side. And you're going to put the key of the original file share. So there's the original data set and there's a clone, right? You put the key of the original file share, and then you create a clone name, and then you can clone it. So you can give as many clones as you want. You can give one clone for development team, you can create one clone for your test team, you can create one clone for your system testing team, so you can create multiple clones. And in this instance, we are creating a clone called Hackathon File Share Clone, which is on the left-hand side in the red rectangle, and then you can say try it out. So what happens is that it creates a job, there's a job key, and then there's a URI. You can use the job key and the URI to find out what is the status of the clone. Next slide, please.
Shoot, come on.
So the next slide talks about deleting a file share. I don't think you will have a reason for deleting a file share, but there are APIs for deleting the file share. So Michael, so one thing I want to mention is that, so once you create a clone, so you will get a clone, and then you will have to mount the clone to your application, and then the application can use the clone. When they make any, for read-only purpose, it just goes fine. But if you're making a write onto the clone, then automatically that write will be saved separately for that user space, and only that user space can access it, and the amount of storage consumed is equivalent to the write that is being made. The original database will not be copied at all. So it is much more efficient than a write on copy function. So it is the most efficient, optimized way to enable or enhance your application. So let's talk about the CI environment with Jenkins and Docker. So one thing, if you go back to the slide that Michael showed, there was one aspect that said Docker integration. So all the EC2 instances for the applications will have the Docker plugin. So if you develop your applications and package it with Docker, so you will have the plugin installed so you can directly access the volume. Now, CI environment, let's talk about that. Next slide, please. So this is the Docker configuration. It's all pre-configured. This information is available for you to for your reading purpose. It's for information only. The configuration is already set, and if you look at it, right, this is for a team called Team Cherry. So this is configured to access the storage volume of the ONTAP cloud for Team Cherry.
Yeah, and this is all just, we want to make you as efficient as possible, so, and limit how many environments you've got to spin up. We're trying to pre-configure the entire environment so you can just do what you do, utilizing us from a data management perspective.
Right. So just quickly run through it. So all of you are familiar with this: development, build, QA, UAT, deploy. So our environment, if you want to use the Jenkins environment, so our solution ONTAP Cloud with API services, it's pre-integrated with Jenkins, with GitLab, with Docker, and it's all connected to ONTAP Cloud. So that means if you're, as part of your build process, if you want to create multiple workspaces, you will get clone workspaces because it's already pre-integrated. So it's not a physical copy, so it's the most efficient and optimized. If you want to take your data set and you want to make replications of your data set, so you're welcome to use the API services to create clones for QA, for UAT, for other kinds of testing. Next slide, please.
And then I should probably put out there, if you do have questions as we're going through this, feel free to just put it in a chat session out to the team, and we'll address those questions.
So this is again the framework. So source code repository, CI, developer workspaces, artifacts repository. In fact, we have got multiple more integrations. Like for example, for Artifactory, we have got JFrog integration, but we're not using this for the purpose of this hackathon. We are using only the integration with Jenkins, GitLab, and Docker for this integration. But you're also free to try out your own integration. So if you have an innovative idea for enhancing CI or CD, you have the API services, you have the container integration. Please feel free to use your imagination and innovation to try out whatever works for you. In the past, people have tried to do things with Kubernetes, things not as part of CI/CD, but as part of the overall framework. They've used Mesosphere integration for data center operating system. So you feel free to try it out. So you'll have all options available to you, and we expose it through RESTful APIs.
And from a judging perspective, it's the teams that are really pushing the bounds, and sometimes they don't work out perfectly, but we still reward what you were trying to do and the work you went through, because we learn as much from the work you're doing as you're going to learn from the environment we've created. And that's the beauty of hackathons. You know, everyone is learning, everyone's experimenting.
So this slide, so the same concept, right? So when you're creating your working on agile development and you're doing continuous integration, so you create your own dev branch and then make changes. You have your own repo, you have your own dev branch, you make changes, you do unit testing of the changes, then you check it in, and then you do the testing, and then it goes into a cycle. So what we are saying here is that the source code is in Git repository, and then let's say the main source code is already in the repository. So I want to explain one concept called snapshot. Also, snapshot is a point-in-time copy. So before you do cloning, you need to have a master. So that is what snapshot provides. Whether it's an application package in a database, or whether it is application data in a database, or whether it's configuration files in a database, it's all data to us. So before you clone it, a snapshot happens, which takes a point-in-time copy of that data set, whether it's application package, or whether it's application data, or whether it's configuration files. It takes a point-in-time copy, that is a snapshot, and that is a master copy. And from the snapshot, you can make as many clones as possible. And each of those clones will be a pointer to the snapshot. And snapshot is immutable. You cannot change the snapshot. So that means your master remains the same. Then when they make the changes to the clone, the changes, only the changed information is reflected in the clone, and the rest of the information is pointing to the master. So that is why that is how we optimize storage, we optimize cost, we create storage efficiency. So you can take as many clones as possible. Now suppose, let's say at time T, you made a snapshot. Then you want to make another snapshot at time T1. You want to create some clones. At time T1, you take another snapshot and then you create clones of that snapshot. So that will have the clones that's reflecting the snapshot at time T1. So that is how we can implement it in a CI process. So what you can do is that branch 1, he makes the changes. We have put it in we have packaged it using Docker, and that's become the new baseline. So when the new baseline, take a snapshot of the new baseline and clone it. Clone it to workspace 1, workspace 2, workspace 3, workspace 4, workspace 1000 to all the developers. And then each of them go and then make their own changes. Then they merge the changes. Then you come back to the complete cycle. And then you create the new baseline, which is baseline 2. And then you keep repeating the process. So what you see here is that every workspace that you're creating is a clone. That means you can do it instantaneously in seconds. That's one thing. Otherwise, you have to think of the time you're going to spend creating a workspace for one user and multiply it by the n number of users. So it saves time, it saves storage, and it saves cost also. So if you're an environment where storage or AWS environment, EBS may cost money, or whatever environment, right? So we save that also, right? So it's a very optimized way. And not only that, it expedites the whole CI process. So every time you create a baseline, see now you have created baseline 1.2, take a snapshot of 1.2 and create the workspace 2, and then you can create multiple clones of it. And then make the changes, bring it back to the repo, test it out, build it, and then once it's built, then you can create another baseline, and then from the baseline, you can create additional workspaces with snapshot, which are again clones. So the cycle goes on and on and on. And that is one aspect as part of the build process and the CI process. The other thing is that if you're doing QA, staging, and deployment, and different kinds of testing, and you are doing automated testing, you can also integrate via API services the cloning function, assuming your database is on a system that is managed by ONTAP cloud, whether it can be on AWS, and as Michael referred to, it can be on Azure, or it can be on your premise also in your enterprise data system. If it's on ONTAP cloud, you can actually clone your data set so that the QA, staging, and all the other kinds of testing can use the clone copy of the data set. So that is another way where we can optimize, expedite, and increase the efficiency of your CI/CD process. Next slide, please. So this is just a point of view. So I just want to make 2 points here. One is we will have a pre-integrated Jenkins environment. So you can use that in the pre-integrated Jenkins environment, wherein we integrate our ONTAP cloud and the volume, etc. with Jenkins. In that environment, everything is totally transparent to you. You just go into a Jenkins graphical user interface, put your workflow, and do the processing. So you don't have to do anything because it's already pre-integrated with the API services, with ONTAP cloud, and with the volume and storage and everything. We also give you an environment wherein we will tell you these are the API services, and you can do your own integrations. You can say, okay, fine, I have my own workflow. I want to do my own integration. I know cloning is a great function. I want to use cloning. So please feel free to use it with the API services, and you can do whatever you want to do. You can create your own configuration database, and you can clone it, or you can create your own application database, and you can clone it. You can do whatever you want to do. Next slide, please. So MongoDB. So what we have done is whatever application you're creating, let's talk about 2 things, right? Michael showed you 2 examples. One is creating an application, unique application, IoT application, green energy application, or any business application. You will always need data, right? So, and the data needs to be stored somewhere. In this case, in order for us to make it easy for you, we have used the AWS environment, and we have used EBS volumes for data, and we have encapsulated the EBS volume with ONTAP cloud, so you can get all the functions and features that Michael talked about. You can get duplication, deduplication, you can get encryption, you can get compression, but all on top of it, you can get capabilities like cloning, replication, backup, restore, and everything. So you get all those features. So you're going to use data, whether you use data in files, you can still use ONTAP cloud, or whether you want to create your own database, you can use ONTAP cloud, Only thing is you have to create the database on ONTAP cloud. You can use it for SQL database. You can use it with NoSQL database like Mongo. You can do it on your own. We will give you all the environment. We'll give you the configuration files. In addition to that, we have also got pre-created databases. We have a set of MySQL databases that we have pre-created. We have a set of MongoDB that is pre-created. You may say, okay, I want to focus on my application. Just give me the MongoDB or MySQL DB, and I'll go ahead and create my application and use your cloning feature or other features. You have that option also. You want to create your own database? You can do it. You want to use the database that we have pre-created? You can do that also. This is an example for this is a configuration for you to create your own